Good morning and welcome to Morning Java, brought to you as always by our friends at the GetGo Cafe+Market, where they are open for business, making fresh, hot food 24/7. I'm joined by Dave Molinari, Hall of Fame hockey writer at DK Pittsburgh Sports. And Dave, we almost are upon hockey. Is there any chance of any kind of roadblocks, any kind of bumps getting in the way between now and then?
Have you not been here for 2020?
Yeah, I kind of have.
I wouldn't want to predict what the roadblocks would be, but it's hard to believe that there aren't some potential ones. They certainly haven't emerged yet, but there's still a day or so left in the year, so let's not rule anything out. But we can cautiously be optimistic that the Penguins will get together on Sunday for the start of a training camp.
Mike Sullivan met with reporters briefly yesterday, and in doing so, he mentioned that there are only going to be really 7 days of practice leading into the game against the Flyers. And I had been predicting 9, even though there was a 10-day span, because I thought that for sure you were going to have to give them a day off at some point or other. But there's more to it. There's physicals, there's tests, and other stuff here. It seems almost inconceivable, but it's the case that they will have the Penguins and most other NHL teams, not all, the non-playoff teams get, I think it's 3 extra days.
I think that's right.
That they will have even less preparation time than what they had in the summer in advance of those playoff games. This is wild. Yeah, wild.
Yeah, it's I think the Penguins have a bit of an edge over most teams because I think you could pretty much pick their 23-man roster today, and if they don't have any injuries, you could probably nail it. There might be 1 or 2 guys who, based on training camp performances or injuries, don't show up or do show up on the opening night roster, but they're pretty well set. There's not a lot of guys auditioning for spots on the major league roster, which I don't know is the case with a lot of teams. And if you're only going to have what amounts to a week worth of preparation for a season, that could give them an early advantage against some of their competition.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture how awful this hockey is going to be when we start, whether it's the games in Philadelphia or even, the first handful of games we got to see in these playoff games, and not just Pittsburgh. It wasn't just Pittsburgh's performance against Montreal. In general, the playoffs, at least to me and watching from afar, felt like they took forever to get going. Like maybe, I don't know, halfway through the first round, arguably the second. I don't know.
Yeah, that's obviously subjective, but yeah, it took time, which makes sense that you don't get the best hockey in the early weeks of the regular season, which that was tantamount to they were playing games after having several months off. So it's no surprise that things were below playoff standards then. Although it's worth noting, I think, that the Penguins played better in their first 2 games against Montreal than they did in the second 2, which kind of flies in the face of the logic behind a slow start. But in general, I expect that there will be a lot of rust to shake off in the early weeks of this. The thing is, if you're able to avoid that and get a reasonably good start, that will
it's
be
a big deal. It's a big deal,
much bigger than in an 82 game season when you're only playing 56. You could build a bit of a margin for error for yourself, or if you get in a hole, climbing out of it will be quite a challenge, especially in the division that the Penguins are in. There are 5 pretty accomplished teams in the division, and only 4 are going to make the playoffs. The other 3 all seem the trajectory of those franchises is headed up.
Yeah,
So,
that's the key here, is that very rarely do you see, and this goes back through hockey history, a year in which there isn't one team in a division that doesn't, make some kind of significant move upward. And the Rangers look like they're going to be, I mean,
the
pretty.
Rangers are going to be very good. It's a
Yes,
question of when it happens.
exactly. It's how long it takes. It's not just Alexi Lafreniere, but Capo Caco and other guys that they have I don't know how many of them are going to reach Artemi Panarin's level that he showed last year, Mika Zibanejad, but they're on the path upward. Point is, the Penguins have a really, really small amount of time to get up to speed. And I guess the biggest concern that I'd have if I were Mike Sullivan is that we just saw in the summer, and I understand from what he said yesterday, they're not going to be connecting what happened last season to this season and everything else, but it's not easy. And I don't know what these coaches can do to impress upon everybody, because Dave, realistically, when we go back to this past summer, and the 2 best players on the ice, again, this is subjective, but from my point of view, the 2 best players on the ice in this camp were Sam Lafferty and Evan Rodriguez. That tells me that the rest of the team wasn't where it needed to be. You know what I'm saying? With all due respect,
those 2 guys grossly underpaid.
That's it, right? But if they go through this camp, and you and I are writing about Lafferty and Rodriguez again, I mean, they're in for a rough start.
Yeah. I mean, they will certainly, they have individuals who are capable of, I don't know about carrying an entire team, but who are capable of doing more than 1/20th of the work. And they're going to need it from those guys, from the Crosbys and the Malkins and the Latangs and the Gensels. Those guys are going to have to really step up.
Sullivan made clear yesterday what really should have been obvious to anybody, and that's that there won't be, as you've mentioned yourself, any significant wide open competition for roster spots. They know who they have. They know where they're going to align them. Even on the day that they acquired Kasperi Kapanen, Jim Rutherford just said openly, well, looks like he's going to play with Sid and Jake. So they've had their ideas of what they want to do here for a while. And that's a good thing, as you said. Sullivan also mentioned that there will be competition in the bottom 6 for a spot that normally would be taken by Zach Aston Reese on a line with Teddy Bluger and Brandon Tanev. Who's in line for that competition? What does it look like? And when we're talking about bottom 6, we're obviously talking about Bluger and Tanev having spots. We're probably talking about Jankowski, because he's got to be part of the PK.
Jankowski would be in the middle of the other bottom 6 line, what I would consider the third line with
because for people
and probably Rodriguez, although the identity of the right winger is up for grabs, I think. But
okay, so Jared McCann's in that mix too. So what are we talking about here? Because they're not going to leave McCann out.
No, I would think that fourth line, that we'll call the Bluger line, the fourth line.
Okay.
That the other guy with Tanev will be probably Lafferty, but Colton Sevier, is also a contender, I guess.
I mean, doesn't Sevier strike you? And I'm not being mean here, but doesn't he strike you as the kind of guy that would be your spare part? He's a little bit of an older guy. He's headsy. He's responsible defensively. He killed penalties in Florida. I just wondered if he might not be the odd man out.
Going into camp, I would expect him to be. I mean, I think that Lafferty should have to play his way out of the lineup. I have him penciled in there on that line in the Aston Reese spot. And I think Sevier would be a reasonably good bottom 6 spare part to have around. There are going to be injuries, probably more so than normal, just because you have a shorter camp. And with the makeup of the divisions, at least the East Division, you've got a lot of rivalries in there, and those games tend to be a little more nasty than the average one. The elbows are a little higher, a little more often. So I think that's going to increase the chances of injury. So you're going to need not only your 23-man roster, but I think you'll see guys on the taxi squad get into games occasionally too.
My goodness, there'll be like no surprises in this camp. I'm trying to picture like who could rise up that would make some kind of big hit or big impression. Not that what John Marino did was common, certainly not at his position, but it took Marino, and you'll remember this,
Oh,
what, 4 or 5 practices to just completely floor everybody
yeah.
up in Cranberry. Like they just knew right away, like, whoa, what is that?
Well, yeah, and I mean, he had actually shown quite well at the prospects tournament in Buffalo. I mean, that was kind of his coming out party. But then when he got in against established NHL competition in camp, and he didn't regress at all, that's when it was clear that he was something special. But when you look at you're mentioning defensemen, they have a couple of guys they like in Cam Lee and Josh Maniscalco, but there are 8 guys on one-way contracts ahead of them, and
arguably Joseph too. Pierre-Olivier Joseph would be ahead of them
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
So that's 9.
so, yeah. So it's hard to imagine them coming in, fresh out of college and replicating what John Marino did. I guess that would be a great problem for management to have if Cody Ceci or Mike Matheson got knocked off the third pairing, strictly not because of poor performance on their part, but because one of the kids came in and played so well.
Oh, that'd be
But
great. Yeah.
yeah, but I really don't think anyone is anticipating that.
The Penguins have the 56 game schedule. They have games relatively even in terms of the way they're spaced out. Only 6 sets of back-to-backs. I guess Mike Sullivan could have said yesterday, you know what? We've got a new number 1 in Tristan Jarry. We're gonna ride him. We're gonna, Martin Brodeur him, right into the ice. He didn't. He said very clearly that they have faith in Casey DeSmith and they intend to use him a lot. Did that take you back at all?
Not really. I mean, it is a condensed schedule, not that it's not quite, the games aren't quite as crammed together as I think some of us expected. And as you noted, there are only 6 back-to-backs. But, Casey DeSmith has proven at this level that he's capable of being a backup. He's not a guy you would want to lean on to be a number 1 and to carry you through a long playoff run or anything like that. But when you can't be sure going into the season how Jarry will hold up, under the physical and mental rigors of being the number 1, saying that you plan to give the backup a significant amount of work isn't a bad idea.
Right.
It's not like Sullivan made a commitment that the Penguins must adhere to for the balance of the season. If Jarry's playing well and wants to play more than the coaches have him penciled in for, I don't think they will object. But I think going into it with the idea that you're going to play DeSmith maybe 1 out of every 3 games or 1 out of every 4 isn't a bad idea.
Yeah, it's one funny thing about the rigors of this schedule. or the perceived rigors to it is if you go back to the playoff bubbles that the NHL had, in which there was, of course, no travel in any capacity, couldn't even go outside. One of the points that Gary Bettman and Bill Daly made throughout that, when they were unapologetically ramming games a little bit tighter together, even in the Stanley Cup final, was that because there was no travel, that it was going to be, easier from the physical standpoint and everything else. And I'll bet over the course of these 56 games, you're going to see a similar thing play out. You're going to a city now and you're staying there to play 2 games. It's not the same as, our favorite trip, the Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver trip, where you play 3 of those in 4 nights in 2 provinces in 3 cities that are, well, certainly in the case of Vancouver, nowhere near the other 2. And that's that game that the Canucks are just sitting there waiting for you to beat you by 7 goals and laugh through the whole thing. That is different
won't
world.
have the time zone, playing in this division. Their longest trip will be, an hour flight to Boston.
Yeah.
It won't quite be the equivalent of being in the bubble, but it won't, the travel won't be nearly as demanding as it is in a normal season. And I really like that idea of the baseball type series of playing multiple games in a city.
You mean beyond this, Dave?
Oh yeah.
Oh, really? Why?
Well, for one thing, it will save some money, which obviously the owners will be looking to do, I think, for quite a few seasons, after all the money that was lost in this pandemic. I think that the games tend to be more intense when you have what's normally a home and home. That second game, there's a little bit of dislike that tends to settle in. I think that's good. The only thing that I think might mitigate against it is if fans make it clear that they don't like paying to see the same opponent twice in 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. That's the one thing that would, as maybe the only thing that would hurt the idea moving forward. I remember Tom Rooney, our mutual friend who used to be the Penguins CEO, talking about how difficult it is to sell certain tickets for certain opponents on certain nights. This was back when this was a thing for the Penguins at the Civic Arena. And
Winnipeg on a Tuesday, I think, was what he.
I remembered Anaheim on a Monday, but you can go ahead with Winnipeg on a Tuesday if it makes. But
in November, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah, and those are rough, and we have to remember that not every team in the NHL is like Pittsburgh and has this this line of humans waiting to buy season tickets to get into the place. So I do think that that'll be a factor, especially as you go back to a normal schedule and you do bring in Western Conference teams who only make it here once. So maybe it's something you just do, you feed into the computer that it's just Eastern Conference teams where you do these series and say, hey, listen, maybe they could even sell them as packages, right?
Oh, and fans might
2 games against the Rangers, come and get them.
Fans might come to the conclusion that, as I say, those second games are even more intense than the first. And, a significant percentage of the fans might come to embrace the idea.
Yeah, this has some merit here. It also sounds like, something we should maybe just take right to the league and propose that they keep it because it keeps travel costs down.
Yeah.